The boy had learned to stay quiet in that house. Silence was safer. When he spoke, it often led to anger. When he stayed quiet, he became invisible, and being invisible was sometimes the only way to survive. He lived with his father and stepmother in a small, worn-out house at the edge of town. His real mother had passed away years ago, and since then, life had slowly turned cold. His father worked long hours and returned home tired, barely noticing what happened inside the walls. The stepmother noticed everything, but not in a kind way. To her, the boy was a reminder of a life she did not choose. She saw him as extra weight, extra cost, extra trouble. Every broken plate, every unpaid bill, every bad mood somehow became his fault. She never hit him, never left marks, but her words were sharp and constant. They followed him through the rooms like shadows. He did chores from early morning until night. He cleaned, carried water, fixed what he could, and stayed out of the way. Still, it was never enough. There was always something else he had done wrong. Always another reason for her anger. The only comfort he had was his dog. The dog was not big or strong, just a mixed breed with tired eyes and a crooked tail. The boy had found him years ago near a trash pile, hungry and shaking. From that day on, they became family. The dog slept near his bed, followed him everywhere, and seemed to understand when words were too heavy to say. When the boy felt unwanted, the dog stayed. When the boy felt weak, the dog watched. When the boy cried quietly at night, the dog rested his head against his chest, breathing slowly, reminding him he was not alone. That night started like many others. The stepmother came home angry. The house felt tense before she even spoke. Something had gone wrong at work, or maybe she was just tired. Either way, the storm was coming. She looked around the kitchen and stopped when she saw a small spill on the floor. It was only water. A simple mistake. But to her, it was enough. She called the boy's name. He stepped forward slowly, already knowing what was about to happen. His hand shook as he wiped the floor, apologizing again and again. But apologies only made her angrier. Her voice grew louder. Her words grew heavier. She talked about money, about food, about how he ate too much and gave nothing back. She said he was useless, that he would never be anything, that she was tired of carrying someone else's burden. The boy tried to explain. He tried to speak calmly. He said he would do better. He always did. That was when she said the words that changed everything. She told him to leave. At first, he thought she didn't mean it. She had threatened before, but this time, her face was different. There was no anger left, only decision. She opened the door and pointed outside. It was already dark. The air was cold. The road beyond the house looked empty and endless. She told him not to come back. His father was not home. The boy stood there frozen, his heart pounding so hard it hurt. He looked around the house, hoping someone would stop this, hoping this was just another cruel moment that would pass. It didn't. She grabbed a small bag and threw it toward him. Inside were a few old clothes. Nothing else. No food. No money. The dog ran to the boy's side, barking softly, sensing danger. The stepmother shouted at the dog too, telling it to get out. The boy knelt down and wrapped his arms around the dog. He whispered to him, trying to stay calm. He didn't want the dog to sense his fear, but it was already there. With shaking hands, he picked up the bag. He stepped outside. The door slammed shut behind him. For a moment, he stood there, staring at the closed door, waiting for it to open again, waiting for someone to call his name. No one did. The house lights turned off one by one. That was when it hit him. He was truly alone. The road felt long under his feet. He didn't know where he was going. He just walked. The dog stayed close, brushing against his leg with every step, as if making sure he was still there. The night was quiet. but not peaceful. Every sound felt louder. The wind, distant cars, leaves moving in the dark. Fear wrapped around him tighter with each step. His stomach hurt from hunger. His throat felt dry. His chest felt heavy, like something was sitting on it, pressing down. He thought about turning back, but he didn't. He knew the door would not open again. Hours passed. Or maybe minutes. Time felt strange when there was nowhere to go. Eventually, his legs gave up. He sat down near the edge of a road, pulling the dog close for warmth. The dog licked his hand and rested its head on his knee, looking up at him with trust. That trust hurt more than anything. The boy whispered an apology. He didn't know why he was apologizing, but it felt necessary. The sky slowly changed color. Night moved toward morning. Cold air settled deep into his bones. He had no plan, no home, no idea what would happen next. But he had the dog. And for now, that was enough to keep moving. When the sun finally rose, the world looked the same, but everything had changed. The boy stood up, brushed the dirt from his clothes, and looked down the road again. Somewhere ahead, there had to be a place where they could rest. Somewhere that would not turn them away. With the dog walking beside him, the boy took another step forward, not knowing that this moment, the one where he lost everything, was also the moment his real journey began. Morning came slowly, as if the sun itself was unsure whether it should rise. The boy woke up stiff and cold, his body aching from sleeping on the ground. For a moment, he forgot where he was. Then he saw the open road, the empty fields, and the sky above him. The truth came back all at once. He sat up and looked down at his dog. The dog was already awake, watching him closely, tail giving a small wag when their eyes met. That small movement brought a quiet comfort. At least someone was happy to see him. The boy stood up, brushing dirt and dry leaves from his clothes. His stomach growled loudly, and he felt a sharp pain from hunger. He hadn't eaten since the day before. He checked the small bag again, even though he already knew what was inside. Clothes, nothing else. They started walking. The road stretched on with no clear direction. Houses were far apart now, and the town felt distant. He avoided looking at passing cars. He was afraid someone might stop and ask questions he couldn't answer. As the sun climbed higher, the cold faded, but the hunger grew stronger. The boy searched the ground near fences and bushes, hoping to find anything useful. He found a few wild berries, but wasn't sure if they were safe. He didn't want to risk making the dog sick, or himself. By midday, his legs felt heavy. The dog slowed too, tongue hanging out as it panted. The boy found a small stream and knelt down, drinking carefully. He let the dog drink first. He sat there for a long time, listening to the water. His thoughts felt loud in the quiet space. He wondered if his father had noticed he was gone yet. He wondered if anyone would come looking for him. Deep down, he already knew the answer. As afternoon passed, clouds rolled in. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of rain. The boy pulled his thin jacket closer around himself. He knew another night outside would be worse than the first. At one point, he stopped walking. He looked down at the dog, who was walking closely beside him, never more than a step away. The dog's paws were dirty and sore. Its breathing was heavier now. The boy felt a tight pain in his chest. He knelt down and placed both hands on the dog's face. He spoke softly, his voice shaking. He told the dog it might be better if they separated. He said the dog could find food more easily alone. That maybe someone kinder would take him in. The dog responded by pressing its body closer and licking his hands. It refused to move. The boy closed his eyes, fighting tears. He knew then that they were staying together. No matter what, the rain began suddenly, heavy and cold. Within minutes, both of them were soaked. The dirt road turned slippery. The boy slipped once and scraped his hand, but he didn't stop. They left the road and moved toward the trees, hoping to find some shelter. The forest grew thicker as they walked. Light faded, and shadows stretched between the trees. The boy began to worry he had gone too far. Then he saw it. At first, it looked like part of the forest. Old wood, darkened by time, nearly hidden behind vines and branches. He wiped rain from his eyes and looked again. It was a cabin, small, silent, forgotten. The boy's heart began to race. Fear mixed with hope. He didn't know who owned it or if someone still lived there. But the rain was falling harder now, and the dog was shivering. They moved closer. The door hung slightly open, creaking softly in the wind. The boy stood still, listening. No voices, no movement. Just rain hitting the roof and leaves, rustling above. He pushed the door gently. It opened. The smell inside was old wood and dust. The space was dark but dry. There was a small table, a broken chair, and a fireplace filled with cold ash. Spider webs covered the corners. It was clear no one had been there in a long time. The boy stepped inside, pulling the dog with him. For the first time since being thrown out, he felt something close to relief. They sat on the floor near the wall. The dog curled up tightly, shaking less now that they were out of the rain. The boy leaned back, exhausted. His body felt weak, but his mind kept racing. Was it safe to stay? Would someone come? He didn't know, but he knew one thing. This was better than the road. As evening approached, the rain slowed. The boy searched the cabin carefully. In one corner, he found a few old blankets, dusty but usable. He shook them out and wrapped one around the dog. The dog sighed and rested its head on the boy's leg. The sound filled the cabin, soft and peaceful. The boy stared at the ceiling, watching shadows move as light faded outside. Hunger still hurt, but fear had softened. For the first time, he wasn't completely exposed to the world. Night came again. This time, it felt different. He lay down on the floor beside the dog, listening to the quiet. No shouting, no doors slamming, no cruel words, just silence. Before sleep took him, a small thought formed in his mind. Maybe this cabin was not just a place to hide. Maybe it was a sign. He didn't know how long they could stay. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But as his eyes closed, he held on to one simple feeling. For the first time since being kicked out, he felt safe. Outside, the forest stood still, unaware that inside the forgotten cabin, a boy and his loyal dog had taken their first step toward a new life. The boy woke up to a quiet sound he did not recognize at first. It took him a moment to realize it was birds. Soft, steady, and calm. He opened his eyes slowly and remembered where he was. The cabin. The forest. The dog beside him. The dog was already awake, watching the door as if standing guard. When it noticed the boy move, it stood and stretched, tail wagging gently. The boy sat up and felt the stiffness in his back and legs. The floor was hard, but he had slept deeper than he had in a long time. Sunlight slipped through the cracks in the wooden walls. It made thin lines on the dusty floor. The rain was gone, and the air smelled fresh. For a moment, the boy stayed still, listening. No voices, no footsteps, just the forest breathing around them. He stood up carefully and looked around the cabin again, this time with clearer eyes. In daylight, the place looked old but strong. The roof did not leak. The walls stood firm. It had been built by someone who knew what they were doing. He stepped outside. The forest opened around him. Tall trees, thick bushes, and a narrow path that looked like it had not been used in years. The cabin sat slightly hidden, as if the land itself wanted to protect it. The boy felt something he had not felt in a long time. Control. He returned inside and searched more carefully. Behind the table, he found a small shelf with rusted tools. A hammer, a knife with a worn handle, a few nails. Simple things, but to him, they felt like treasure. Near the fireplace, he noticed a loose floorboard. He knelt down and lifted it. Underneath was a small space with old papers wrapped in cloth. His hands trembled as he picked them up. The papers were yellow and fragile. Some were unreadable, but others were clear enough. Notes written by someone who had lived there long ago. Thoughts about the forest, about being alone, about choosing quiet over noise. The boy read slowly, sounding out words he did not fully understand. The writing felt personal, like someone was speaking directly to him across time. One line stayed with him. Some places wait for the right soul. He folded the papers carefully and placed them back. He did not want to disturb them more than he already had. The day moved on. Hunger returned, sharp and demanding. The boy knew he had to find food. He tied the dog's collar using a piece of cloth and stepped outside again. They moved carefully through the forest. The boy remembered things he had seen before. How to look for signs of water. How to search under rocks. How to watch the dog's reactions. They found berries he recognized this time. He tested one carefully. It was safe. He shared them with the dog, making sure the dog ate first. It was not much, but it was something. Back at the cabin, he worked. He cleaned the floor, pushed away webs, and stacked dry wood near the fireplace. Using the old tools, he fixed a broken chair just enough to sit on it. His hands hurt, but the pain felt different. Useful. The dog followed him everywhere, watching closely, sometimes getting in the way, sometimes helping just by being there. As evening came, the boy managed to light a small fire. The warmth filled the cabin slowly. The light danced on the walls, chasing away shadows. The boy sat near the fire, staring into the flames. His thoughts drifted back to the house he had been forced to leave, to the words thrown at him like stones. He felt anger rise. Then it faded. Here. No one told him he was useless. Here. His work mattered. That night, he slept closer to the fire. The dog curled up tightly beside him. Outside, something moved in the dark, but the cabin held strong. Days passed. The boy fell into a quiet routine. He woke with the sun, searched for food, improved the cabin little by little, and rested when his body demanded it. He learned the sounds of the forest, which ones meant danger and which ones meant nothing at all. The dog grew stronger again. Its coat looked better, its eyes brighter. The boy did too. One afternoon, while clearing weeds near the back of the cabin, the boy noticed something strange. A wooden post buried in the ground. He dug around it with his hands and uncovered an old boundary marker. Curious, he followed the line. The markers formed a rough square around the cabin and nearby land. This place had been claimed once. Later that day, he returned to the papers under the floorboard. This time, he read more carefully. There were mentions of land, of walking boundaries, of choosing to leave without heirs. The boy's heart beat faster. Why would someone leave all this behind? That night, he lay awake thinking about the man who had lived here, about why the cabin felt like it had been waiting. The forest felt less random now. It felt chosen. The next morning, voices reached the cabin. The boy froze. He grabbed the dog and moved quietly to the corner. His heart pounded. He listened as footsteps came closer, then stopped. Two men passed by, talking about hunting, about land deep in the woods. They did not notice the cabin. Not this time. But the boy knew people were nearby. The cabin would not stay hidden forever. Instead of fear, a strange calm settled over him. If someone found him, he would face it. He had survived worse. That evening, he stood outside the cabin, watching the sun set through the trees. The dog sat beside him, calm and alert. The boy realized something important. He was no longer just surviving. He was building, and whatever secret this cabin held, he felt it was tied to him now. The forest grew quiet as night returned. Inside the cabin, the fire burned low. The boy rested his head against the wall, listening to the steady breathing of the dog. Somewhere in the distance, the world continued as always, but here, in this forgotten place, a new chapter was quietly taking shape. The change began quietly, almost without warning. One morning, the boy noticed smoke rising far off beyond the trees. It was not his fire. Someone else was nearby. He stood still, watching the thin line of smoke fade into the sky. His first feeling was fear, sharp and quick. The cabin had been his safe place. The idea of someone discovering it made his chest tighten. The dog sensed it too. Its ears lifted, and it moved closer to the boy's leg. Alert, but calm. The boy took a slow breath. Running would not help. Hiding forever was not possible. If people were coming closer, he needed to be ready. That day, he worked with more care than usual. He cleaned the area around the cabin, hid anything that looked messy, and made sure the fire left no heavy smoke. He told himself that if someone came, he would speak calmly. He would not beg. He would tell the truth. Later in the afternoon, footsteps echoed through the trees. The boy froze. The sound came again. Slow, careful, not rushing. He stepped outside, with the dog beside him. Two men appeared between the trees. They carried backpacks and tools. Their faces showed surprise when they saw the cabin, and even more when they saw the boy. They did not shout. They did not threaten. They asked simple questions. The boy answered honestly. He told them he had nowhere else to go. He told them about being forced out. He did not blame. He did not cry. He simply spoke. The men listened. One of them knelt to greet the dog. The dog sniffed his hand, then sat quietly after a long pause. The men said they were checking old land records and walking boundaries. They had not expected to find anyone living here. The boy felt his heart beat harder. They asked how long he had been staying. He told them the truth, instead of anger. Their expressions softened. They asked to see inside the cabin. The boy hesitated, then nodded inside. The men looked around slowly. They noticed the repairs, the clean floor, the careful use of old tools. One of them spotted the loose floorboard and asked about it. The boy brought out the papers. The men read quietly. Their faces changed. One of them said he recognized the writing. The cabin had belonged to a man who lived alone for many years. A man who avoided town and chose silence. When he disappeared, people assumed he had simply walked away into the forest. Thought there had been no family. No claims. The land had been forgotten. The men explained that the area was marked but never reassigned. No one had cared enough to finish the process. The boy listened, barely breathing. They told him they would need to report finding someone here. But they also said something else. They said the boy had not done anything wrong. They said staying might still be possible. When the men left, the forest felt louder than before. The boy sat on the cabin steps, his thoughts racing. The dog rested its head on his knee. Everything felt uncertain again. The next few days were heavy with waiting. The boy continued his routine, but his focus slipped. Every sound made him turn. Every movement between the trees made his heart jump. Then one morning, a vehicle stopped near the forest edge. More people came. This time, there were questions. Gentle ones. They asked about his age, his family, how he had been living. They noticed the dog. They noticed how the boy spoke to it, how it stayed close. They did not treat him like a problem. They treated him like a person. They contacted his father. When his father arrived, he looked older, smaller somehow. He avoided the boy's eyes at first. The boy stood still, unsure what to feel. There was no shouting, no accusations, just quiet conversation. The truth came out. The father admitted he had not known how bad things had been. He said he had been tired, busy, afraid of conflict. The boy listened without speaking. The people explained the situation. About the cabin. About the land. About the boy surviving alone. The father looked at the cabin, then at the dog, then at his son. Something in his face broke. He apologized. It was simple, late, but real. The boy did not respond right away. Days passed as plans were discussed. Temporary arrangements, school options, legal steps. And then came the surprise. The old land records showed that the man who once owned the cabin had left instructions. If anyone claimed the land, they had to prove need and care. No one ever had. Until now. The boy had lived there, protected it, respected it. That mattered. The decision would take time, but hope was real. That evening, the boy returned to the cabin with the dog. The sun dipped low, painting the trees gold. He sat inside, holding the papers again. For the first time, the future felt open. Not easy. But possible. The cabin, once hidden and forgotten, had spoken for him when no one else did, and the boy understood. Something clearly. Being thrown away had not ended him. It had led him here. The days that followed felt slow and fast at the same time. Slow because every decision seemed to take forever. Fast because life was clearly moving forward, whether the boy was ready or not. He stayed near the cabin while the adults handled things he did not fully understand. Papers were signed. Calls were made. Questions were asked again and again. Each time, the boy answered calmly. He had learned that telling the truth was easier than trying to defend himself. The dog stayed close through it all. When people came, the dog sat quietly at the boy's side. When the boy felt overwhelmed, he rested a hand on the dog's head and felt steady again. The forest no longer felt like a hiding place. It felt like a home that had done its job. Soon, it became clear that the boy could not stay completely alone anymore. There were rules. There were systems. But there was also care. He was placed with people who spoke gently and listened when he talked. They did not rush him. They did not demand smiles or quick trust. They let him keep the dog. That mattered more than anything. He visited the cabin often, sometimes alone, sometimes with others. Each visit felt different. The place that once meant survival now felt like a memory being carefully stored. The legal decision came weeks later. The land could not be given fully to the boy yet, but the cabin was protected. No one could tear it down. No one could take it away. It would remain. The boy stood outside the cabin one last time before winter fully arrived. The trees were quieter now. Leaves covered the ground. The air was cold, but clear. He touched the door, remembering the night he had first stepped inside, soaked and shaking. He was not that boy anymore. Life changed in small steps. School was hard at first. He had fallen behind. Some days felt overwhelming, but he tried. Every day, he tried. The dog waited for him when he returned home, tail wagging, eyes bright. At night, the boy slept without fear of doors slamming open. Sometimes, his father visited. Their conversations were slow and careful. Trust did not return quickly, but effort mattered. The stepmother did not come. The boy did. Not ask about her. He learned something important during those months. Not everyone who hurts you will apologize. And that is okay. The cabin stayed with him in quiet ways, in how he valued silence, in how he took care of small things, in how he noticed what others ignored. When people asked him how he survived, he spoke about the dog, about routine, about not giving up on the next step, even when the future felt unclear. He did not speak with anger. He spoke with honesty. Years passed. The boy grew taller, stronger. The dog grew older, slower, but still loyal. They visited the cabin one final time together. The boy fixed a loose board and cleared the path. Not because he needed to, but because it felt right. He sat outside with the dog as the sun dipped low. He realized then that being kicked out had not been the end of his story. It had been the beginning. The cabin had not saved him. He had saved himself. The dog had simply stayed. And sometimes that is all it takes. Someone who stays, someone who believes, someone who walks beside you until you learn how to walk forward on your own. Time moved forward in a way the boy once thought would never happen. Not fast, not slow, just steady. Each year added small changes that slowly shaped his life into something stable. He grew into his routines. School became easier as he caught up. Reading no longer felt heavy. Writing helped him think. He learned to speak when something felt wrong and to listen when others shared their stories. The dog aged quietly. Its steps were slower now, its naps longer, but its eyes still followed the boy everywhere. Even when it slept, one ear stayed alert, as if guarding a world that no longer needed guarding. They walked together every morning. Short walks now, along safe paths. The boy adjusted his pace without thinking. Loyalty had taught him patience. The cabin stayed in his thoughts. Sometimes he visited alone. Sometimes he brought supplies to fix small things. A broken step, a loose hinge. He never changed much. The place did not need improvement. It only needed respect. People in the nearby town slowly learned his story. Not through headlines or loud talk, just through quiet sharing. Someone mentioned the boy who lived in the woods. Someone else added how he survived with nothing but a dog. Over time, the story softened. It became less about pain and more about strength. The boy did not enjoy attention. He preferred listening. But when asked, he spoke honestly. He talked about fear, about hunger, about learning that staying kind did not mean staying weak. Some listened carefully. Some needed that story more than they admitted. One afternoon, a younger child asked him if he had ever been angry at the world. The boy thought for a long time before answering. He said yes. But he also said anger did not build shelters or keep fires burning. The child nodded, understanding more than expected. The dog grew tired that winter. One morning, it did not rise when the boy reached for the leash. Its breathing was slow and uneven. The boy sat beside it, speaking softly, telling stories it already knew. There was no panic, no fear. Just quiet. The dog passed with its head resting on the boy's knee, in the same way it had rested so many nights before. The boy stayed there for a long time. Grief did not come loudly. It arrived gently and stayed. He buried the dog near the cabin, under a tall tree where sunlight reached the ground even in winter. He placed a simple marker. No words, just a smooth stone. Loyalty did not need explanation. Life continued. The boy carried the lessons with him. He volunteered. He helped others find quiet ways forward. He did not save people. He stood beside them until they learned how to stand on their own. Years later, the cabin became part of a local program, a place for reflection, a place for those who needed silence more than advice. The boy visited often. Sometimes he sat alone. Sometimes others joined him. The forest remained calm, as if it remembered everything and asked for nothing in return. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, the boy stood where the door once closed behind him years ago. He breathed in deeply. He realized then that being rejected had never defined him. What defined him was staying kind, staying curious, staying human. Journey that began with being kicked out had led him somewhere real, somewhere whole, and the cabin, the dog, the silence, all of it had played its part, not as miracles, but as reminders that even when the world closes a door, the path forward can still open quietly, step by step. The boy did not think of himself as a special person. He had learned long ago that labels did not matter much. What mattered were actions, small and steady, done when no one was watching. Life settled into a quiet rhythm. He worked, studied, helped where he could, and returned home each evening with a sense of purpose. There was no rush to prove anything anymore. He no longer measured his worth by how others saw him. Still, the past never fully disappeared. Some nights, memories came back without warning. The sound of a door closing. The feeling of standing outside with nowhere to go. When that happened, he did not fight it. He let the memory pass through him like a wave, knowing it no longer had the power to knock him down. He kept visiting the forest. Even without the dog, he walked familiar paths. At first, the silence felt heavy. Then it felt honest. He learned that silence could hold comfort too. The cabin stood as it always had, quiet, strong, waiting. He opened the door and stepped inside, feeling the cool air wrap around him. Dust floated in the light. The place looked almost the same as it had years ago, and yet it felt different. It was no longer a shelter. It was a reminder. Sometimes people came with him, not crowds. Just one or two at a time. People who needed space to breathe. People who had lost something and did not yet know how to name it. He did not give speeches. He did not offer advice unless asked. He simply stayed. And often, that was enough. One afternoon, a young boy came with him. The child was quiet, careful with his words, his eyes always searching the ground. The boy recognized that look instantly. He had once worn it himself. They sat outside the cabin, watching the wind move through the trees. The child asked if the cabin had always been there. The boy smiled and said yes, but it had only mattered when someone needed it. The child thought about that for a long time. As the sun lowered, the child asked another question. He asked if things really get better. The boy did not answer right away. Then he said, "They get different. And sometimes, different is better in ways you don't expect." The child nodded, holding on to those words like something fragile. When they left, the boy stayed behind a little longer. He walked to the tall tree where the dog rested. He stood there quietly, hands in his pockets, breathing slowly. Time had softened the pain, but love had kept the memory alive. That night, he returned home and wrote in a small notebook he kept. He wrote about the forest, about loyalty, about how survival had taught him compassion. Instead of bitterness. Writing helped him understand himself, that it helped him see how far he had come. Years continued to pass. The boy became a man, not suddenly, not dramatically. Just gradually, through choices made day after day. He was invited once to speak at a small gathering. He hesitated but agreed. He did not tell his whole story, only the parts that mattered. About being pushed away, about finding strength in unlikely places. People listened quietly. Some wiped their eyes. Others simply sat still, thinking. Afterward, a woman thanked him and said his words, reminded her to look at her own child differently. The boy carried that moment with him for a long time. He understood then that stories were not meant to impress. They were meant to connect. The cabin eventually became known. Not widely, but enough. It was cared for, protected, left simple and untouched. Boy made sure of that. He wanted it to remain what it had always been, a place where nothing was demanded, a place where you could arrive broken and leave steady. One evening, many years after the night, he was forced out. He stood at the edge of the forest as the sun set. The sky glowed softly, colors blending into one another. He thought about that younger version of himself, the one who had stood in the dark with a small bag and a loyal dog. He wished he could speak to him. He would tell him to keep walking. He would tell him that kindness would not make him weak. He would Tell him that staying human was the bravest choice of all. As darkness settled, the boy turned and walked away from the forest, calm and certain. The journey had not erased his past, it had transformed it, and the story that began with rejection ended not with revenge or triumph, but with something quieter and stronger. Peace. And that, he knew, was more than enough. Life did not stop testing him, even after peace had settled in. It never does. The tests just changed shape. One spring, after many quiet years, the town faced hard times. Work became scarce. Tension grew. People spoke more sharply, listened less, and carried worry on their faces. The boy, now older, noticed how easily fear could return when life felt uncertain. He felt it too, but he had learned something important long ago. Panic solves nothing. Presence matters. So he stayed present. He spent more time walking the town, checking on people he knew. He helped repair fences, fix doors, carry groceries. Nothing big. Just small things done without asking for praise. Some people asked him why he bothered. He said because once, someone had bothered to leave a door open for him. Even if they never knew it, the forest became busier during those months. More people needed space, needed quiet, needed somewhere to think without being watched. The cabin welcomed them without words. He made sure rules stayed simple. Respect the place. Respect yourself. Leave things as you found them. People listened. One evening, a man arrived carrying anger like a heavy coat. His voice was tight. His hands shook. He spoke fast, as if afraid silence would break him. The boy did not interrupt. He waited. When the man finally stopped talking, the forest filled the space between them. Wind threw leaves. A bird calling far off. The man breathed out and looked different. Whiter. He said he did not expect quiet to help. The boy smiled and said, "Quiet has a way of reminding us who we are." Not long after, a group from the town asked if the cabin could be used more officially. A retreat space. A place for reflection. The boy thought carefully. He agreed, but only under one condition. No signs. No fees. No schedules. The place would remain simple. They agreed. That decision protected the heart of the cabin. Years moved forward again. The boy grew lines around his eyes from smiling and from thinking. He carried himself with calm strength. People trusted him, not because he spoke loudly, but because he stayed consistent. Sometimes children visited the cabin on school walks. They asked questions about the forest, about the cabin, about the dog they had heard stories about. The boy told them gently. He said loyalty can change life. He said being kind to those who are. Small or scared matters more than being impressive. One child asked, "If bad people ever change?" The boy answered honestly. He said some do, some don't, and waiting for them to change should never stop you from growing. The child nodded, satisfied. That night, the boy returned home tired but steady. He sat by his window, listening to the quiet outside. He thought about the stepmother, not with anger, with distance. He realized he no longer needed closure from her. He had built his own. The cabin had taught him that peace does not require permission. As seasons turned again, the boy felt something else change. A pull toward teaching more openly, writing more clearly, sharing lessons in ways that could travel beyond the forest. He began writing short reflections. Nothing dramatic. Just truths learned through living. People read them. Some shared them. The words reached places he had never been. One letter arrived from far away. Someone wrote that his story helped them leave a harmful place, helped them choose safety. The boy held that letter for a long time. He understood then that survival stories do not belong only to the survivor. They become tools. One autumn evening, as the sky dimmed and the forest cooled, the boy returned to the cabin alone. He lit a small fire and sat quietly, listening to it crackle. He closed his eyes and remembered the night he first arrived. Wet clothes, shaking hands. A loyal dog pressed against his side. He smiled softly. He whispered a thank you, not to the past, to the strength it revealed when he left the cabin that night. He did not look back, not because it no longer mattered, but because it was already part of him. The journey that began with being kicked out had now touched many lives. Quietly, gently, without asking for attention. And that, he knew, was the truest kind of change. The boy woke up before sunrise, the way he often did now. The cabin was quiet except for the soft sound of his dog breathing beside him. For a long moment, he stayed still, staring at the wooden ceiling. He thought about how far they had come and how strange it felt to wake up without fear pressing on his chest. That feeling was still new. It hadn't fully settled yet, but it was real. He stepped outside and felt the cold air on his face. The land looked calm in the early light. The trees stood tall and patient, like they had been waiting for him all along. The dog stretched, shook off the sleep, and wagged his tail. That simple joy reminded the boy that life did not always need to be loud to be meaningful. Over the past months, the cabin had become more than a shelter. It had turned into a place where broken days slowly found their shape again. The boy learned how to fix small things. A loose hinge, a cracked step, a leak in the roof. Each repair made him feel a little stronger. The dog stayed close, always watching, always ready. People from nearby started to notice the cabin again. At first, it was just a passerby leaving a bag of food on the steps. Then someone else brought old blankets. No one asked too many questions. They simply nodded, smiled, and left. The boy learned that kindness did not always come with long talks. Sometimes it came quietly. One afternoon, a man from the nearby town stopped by. He wasn't dressed fancy and didn't act important. He asked if the boy needed work. The boy hesitated at first. Trust still felt risky. But the man spoke calmly and didn't rush him. He said the work was simple, helping repair fences and clear land. The boy agreed to try. The first day of work was tiring. His hands hurt and his back ached. But when he returned to the cabin that evening, he felt proud. He had earned something on his own. The dog greeted him like he'd been gone for years, jumping and spinning in circles. The boy laughed, a real laugh that surprised even him. With time, work became routine. The boy learned how to manage his days. Morning walks with the dog. Work until afternoon. Evenings spent cooking simple meals and planning the next day. It was not an easy life, but it was honest. For the first time, he felt in control of his own story. Sometimes, memories of the past tried to pull him back. The shouting, the cold nights, the feeling of being unwanted. Those thoughts still came, usually late at night. When they did, the boy would place his hand on the dog's back and breathe slowly. The steady warmth reminded him that he was not alone anymore. One evening, a storm hit the area hard. Wind rattled the cabin walls and rain pounded the roof. The boy checked every corner, making sure nothing would break. When a loud crack echoed from outside, his heart jumped. He grabbed a flashlight and stepped into the rain. The dog right beside him. A tree had fallen near the path, blocking the way out. The boy stood there for a moment, rain soaking his clothes. Instead of panic, he felt calm. He knew what to do. The next day, he borrowed tools and cleared the path with help from the man he worked for. It felt good to face trouble and not feel helpless. As the seasons changed, the land around the cabin shifted too. Leaves fell. Snow covered the ground. Then green returned again. Through it all, the boy stayed. He learned to plant small crops. He fixed an old stove. He built a simple fence so the dog could run safely. One day, a woman from town stopped by. She worked with a group that helped young people who had nowhere to go. She had heard about the boy and wanted to check on him. She didn't speak like someone trying to take control. She listened. The boy told her his story, slowly, choosing his words carefully. He spoke about being kicked out, about the dog, about the cabin. He didn't blame anyone. He simply told the truth. The woman nodded and thanked him for trusting her. She offered help. School auctions, training programs, a safer place to live if he wanted. The boy didn't answer right away. That night, he thought deeply. He walked outside with the dog and looked at the stars. This place had saved him. But maybe it didn't have to hold him forever. In the end, he chose a middle path. He agreed to attend training in town during the week while keeping the cabin as his home for now. The woman supported his choice. She said strength wasn't about staying or leaving. It was about choosing what came next. Life slowly expanded beyond survival. The boy learned new skills. He met people who treated him with respect. Not pity, respect. That mattered more than anything. Every evening, he returned to the cabin, greeted by the dog and the quiet land. One afternoon, as he walked back along the path, he saw a child standing near the edge of the woods. The child looked lost and scared. The boy approached gently and asked if they were okay. The child shook their head. The boy remembered that feeling. The fear, the loneliness. Without thinking too much, he sat down and spoke softly. He shared food. He listened. Soon, help arrived for the child, and they were taken somewhere safe. As the boy watched them leave, something settled inside him. He realized he had crossed an invisible line. He was no longer just surviving his own pain. He was strong enough to help someone else through theirs. That night, he sat by the fire with the dog resting nearby. The flames danced, casting warm light on the cabin walls. He thought about the future. It still held unknowns. Hard days would come again. But fear no longer ruled his thoughts. The cabin, once abandoned, now stood as proof of resilience. The dog, once just a companion, had become family. And the boy, once unwanted, had grown into someone who knew his worth. He closed his eyes, listening to the quiet. The world hadn't suddenly become kind, but he had learned how to stand within it. And for the first time, that felt like enough.